Ah, that looks like it's going through the motions a bit more.
You got a tech upgrade today, friend. That's why your iPad, you know, it's a new, you're on a new operating system.
I did, but I'm not on my iPad, I'm on my computer.
Right, right. But I mean, the field.
Yes, yes.
You're arranging the field right now. It's cool. I'm watching it. It's cool.
All right. Okay. So, apologies for my my slowness. It's I'm coming online slowly. All right, take it back to Zoom. It's just done loads of different things. Just a warning to anyone who goes live on Facebook. It's changed it all around. There we go. It takes you to it as well, so you've got the sound coming through. All right. So just I'll just open it up on my page so that I can see the comments. There we go. Thank you everyone who's with us. If anybody wishes to share, that would be awesome. I'm just going to share it to the Love Speaks Love page, my work page, and a few groups as well. I have hematite in my socks because I felt like I needed it. All right, turn that down. Brilliant. Okay. Here we are on Love Speaks Love. I'm Denise, your host, for those that don't know me, and my beautiful guest today is Julie Dhara Roberts. Welcome, sweetheart.
Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. This feels like it's been a long time coming, actually. I first saw you on one of Lisa Transcendence Brown's videos, I think, on YouTube. I think you were talking, it was like a group setting, and I think you were talking about Andaras. And then again with Katie and DeCrow, there was some, I think it was the trees one, maybe. It was like an activation of the trees, like some crystalline activation. And then on Todd. And here we are now. So Yay. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much.
And for those that don't know, Love Speaks Love is a platform for people to share wisdom, share experience, ceremony sometimes. Today is a 4/4 gateway. It's the 22nd of April. And it's also Earth Day. So we are bearing that in mind as well with what we share here. So I'm going to, while people are joining us, 11 as I just looked at that. I usually start with the heart-to-heart connecting with the heart of Gaia. So let us do that. So I invite us all to take a few long and slow deep breaths, breathing love into your beautiful, beautiful hearts. And breathing out love, breathing love into your body, into every cell. And breathing it out to the space where you are. And as it's Earth Day today, let us breathe love to every plant, every tree, every animal, every creature being, to all of the waters of the planet. And extending our heart awareness out to the heart of Gaia. And beaming love from your beautiful hearts to the heart of Gaia. Connecting with the New Earth templates to to the crystalline matrix that emanates out from Gaia's beautiful heart. And as we do this, just feeling Gaia's love for all of us and her gratitude. For all that we are and all that we do. And extending that heart awareness out now to the heart of the sun. Feeling the love and the energy from the sun going into your beautiful heart, into your solar plexus, connecting with your inner sun. And connecting our hearts to the heart of Source Creator. Breathing in Source love to every cell of our bodies. Recognizing that we are all in one unified field of love. Breathing deeply. Feeling the love moving around your body into every cell. And on this special Earth Day, just beaming Gaia and all of the beings upon her to all consciousness on the planet, beaming love. And Julie, I don't know if you want to use those tuning forks again.
I popped up to get the sun one when you started talking about the sun too, because I just brought her. You still hear me, Denise?
That was a little bit quiet. Let me just
Yeah, I put my I got an external mic. That'll help. Is that better? They're more vibrational then. They're not the audible kind so much. I don't know if you saw, I was doing it while you were leading the.
Yeah. I opened my eyes at one point and there you were. Thank you. So if anybody's eyes are still closed, just opening them whenever you're ready.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that sound in. It reminded me, what did it remind me of? It reminded me of, I can't think of the words. No, it's not coming. Words and me are not going hand in hand today. And breathe. Okay. So we connected, we had quite a long conversation one day when you were out in the field doing some work with water, a message conversation, not a face-to-face conversation. And I love that there's so much overlap in what we do, but it's kind of very different as well, both into crystals, both into sound, both doing a lot of grid work, gatekeepers, all of the above really, but I think in quite different ways. And I'm quite intrigued as to, I know you've got like the spiritual background, and same as I did, your family did yoga, so you were introduced to yoga at a young age. But I'm intrigued as to where your science background comes in, and what that was. If you want to just
sure. So when, like, when you're a kid and you're whatever in preschool or kindergarten and people ask you what you want to be when you grow up, my answer has always been the same. I was always astronaut. Like I was always connected to the space and to the stars from was like, I have to get into space from like when I was the little Julie. And so I went through school. I was really good at math and science. That was what I was into. And then when I did one of those, what should you go to college for things with my guidance counselor in high school, it came up with aeronautical engineering. And I was like, oh, that it kind of like ticked all the bells of things. It was like, oh, I could design spaceships. I was like, maybe if I design a spaceship, they'll let me go up in them. So I was like, didn't really even know what that meant or was, or what I was getting myself into, quite honestly, because engineering school is not like a casual thing to undertake. It's pretty rigorous. But I signed up and I got into some good schools and went and did undergrad in aerospace engineering.
Wow. And did you work with that as well?
No, I ended up like my 8th semester. So here we do like freshman, sophomore, senior. My 2nd semester, senior year, I dropped out. My poor mother dropped out and moved across country and sort of had my like spiritual awakening and then fast forward 10 years later, I was thinking about going to school for either acupuncture or a naturopathic or osteopathic school. And I needed a bachelor's equivalent wasn't enough. I needed to finish my degree. So I finished my degree and then found this thing called ecological engineering, which is, I was like, oh, I could use my engineering skills for good. So I worked for a company. I worked with John Todd, he does Oceanarcs Institute and found that he's a professor at UVM, but he does what's called the living machine. So he basically takes water in, runs it through plant roots and through all these systems and like puts it back out more clean. So like living is like a greenhouse so he uses them at, rest stations at the side of the road to, filter for houses to discharge gray water. And so I got a job. I did an internship with him for like a year and then landed myself a job at this company called Sustainable Strategies, which we did composting toilets and gray water, wash water gardens. So I was an engineer for like this long as like in actual practice. But when I graduated, I was supposed to graduate college in 1992. And that's when the US engaged in some nefarious activity in Iraq, the first Gulf War. And I had a professor, the class I always wanted to go to was called flight vehicle design. I was doing all the other BS of engineering to get to this class, but he worked for Raytheon. Raytheon's a company that designed the like Patriot missiles, the Scud missiles. He turned our class into like missile design class.
Wow.
And I went to his office hours and I was like, I didn't say it like this because I was 20, whatever, but I was like, I can't be in your class. It's making me ill. Like, I can't, this isn't. And he looked at me, he's like, you're in aeronautical engineering. We work for defense companies. Who do you think you are? Like, that's what we do. We work for defense companies. And I was like, that's what I signed up for. So I stopped going to his class and I got an F and I stopped going to a few other classes and shoved all my stuff into a U-Haul with a buddy of mine. And we moved to California after I graduated. Anyway, that was my circuitous, but I ended up going back to engineering and I did get my bachelor's 10 years later and I did work for ecological, but that was like when I had the new slant and that was like when I started realizing that water had consciousness and water was alive and water could talk to me. So this one summer, I was working at this company called Sustainable Strategies and we would do some like, the bread and butter we did was like more sewage treatment, like practical civil engineering things. But when we get like this cool client that was going to pay us to do cool things, we did that. So this one client had this house on an island that you had to canoe out to it, just like a little cottage, like house, like a hut thing, like not seasoned, not insulated. And we were designing a wash water garden. They wanted to sell it. So the thing here, one of the biggest sources of pollution here in New England is aging septic systems. They get cracks in them and then they pollute and spew all the poop all into the waters. So there's a thing called Title V. It's a Massachusetts code where you have to, if you're selling a house, you have to bring it up to code for the septic system. So it's not polluting. So they wanted to sell this house, but they couldn't because it didn't have, the stuff. So they wanted us to we designed zero discharge wastewater gardens that would like trans-evaporate the gray water. And then they'd have a composting toilet for the black water with the poop in it. So anyway, I was working with these clients and working on this design. And I just casually mentioned, I was like, so no one's staying at your house. Like, could I visit, or could I spend a weekend there? It would really help me. And they're like, oh, you can stay the summer. Like, they gave me like the keys to the house was the code to their canoe, because it was padlocked on shore, and they like, I had an oar. So I was like, okay. And I like paddled my way over, and it was like the best summer of my young life. And I spent time, but it really taught me the water. Like, I had to haul over, gallons of water. There was no running water. There was no electricity. There was no, and I was there, and I just like, really, that was when I started directly communicating with the consciousness of water. It was that summer. Does that make sense? So that's like...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love all that. And how did that actually happen? How did it come in to connect with water? Like, do you feel water like was talking to you and you just heard it? Like, how, or did you... I'm just intrigued.
Yeah, it was more the like preciousness of it, and what we were as a species, at least here where I live, what we're doing to it. And I found Dr. Emoto's work at this time too. And so there's a thing called, so in this field of ecological engineering, it was very much, there's a thing called flow forms. They're actually in the UK, maybe, the woman who designed them or the gentleman who designed them. So it's basically, and this goes perfect with the love meets love. So a flow form is like a fountain that's like a purification thing, but it moves the water like this. And it moves it, it reproduces what the blood does in the ventricles of your heart. It moves it in these like like figure 8 things. So when what I like concentrated on in engineering school was fluid mechanics, because that was like the thing that was just like smoke glass, like fluid dynamics was my thing. And so the flow forms, and it was like, oh, and I moved it through, and like, and it just, so I was into that. I was just like really opening up my consciousness to all that. So how did water start talking to me? It's a good question. No one's asked me that. I was just like out on the lake, or I'd wake up some mornings. Here's where it is. I'd wake up one morning, I woke up and it was sunrise. And you know how here when the climate changes and the water is warmer than the air, and then the smoke, like the columns, I woke up one morning and the lake was like orange, like the color we consider like Venus color now, like orange, purple, pink. And there were these round columns of like mist, smoke, like coming from the lake, but not like the whole thing, like these columns. And I got out on the canoe and I was like canoeing through them and like around them. And I was just like, something's happening here. So maybe that was that like, like awakening. It's just like it being in the, having to canoe to work. And, I put that quotes, I actually did canoe. I'd canoe to my car, but just being at the water and being with the water. And, there was no technology involved here, right? This is back before the era of cell phones anyway. Like cell phones didn't really exist as a thing. Remember the 90s?
But it was like, isn't it hard to remember without them now? And I resisted for so long.
I went through engineering school on a Texas Instrument calculator. Like there wasn't email when I went to college. Like, I mean, there was a little, but not really. Anyway. But yeah, so that it was just like a direct communication. And I was there. I felt like there's that true soul calling of work with the waters of the planet, work with the water, that was like, and then I had this technology and these skills, and I was working for a company that was doing that. And it felt all very synergistic. And
absolutely. And I love what you were saying before about like the figure of 8s, pretty much, that water went through. That gave me a big nudge when you said that. And it just, even though these things aren't mainstream, the fact that they're out there already, the fact that they're the foundations to really get water back into a pristine condition are already there. There was something when I read your because you've got 2 websites. One is mainly Dhara's, and your sessions and things, and the other one is you describing grid work that you've done and Oh, that's funny. Katie's just put something on YouTube. She's just flashed up in the, Katie and Dick Crow's just flashed up in the corner of my screen. And I so associate you two together. And I've lost my train of thought. Where was I going?
You were going.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you did Katie's course about grid work, you learned how to kind of write up in a pretty scientific way, or you used your scientific background to kind of aid with that, exactly what you do when you're doing grid work, and so you can, you know, share it with other people.
Yeah, I didn't learn that. I took Katie's course and it was tremendous, and it was a huge door opening for me, and for it I will always be tremendously grateful. But I didn't learn the write-up part. In fact, I think it like freaked her out a little bit that I did that, because I was like, that's what you do. Like, you do an academic, you know, like a paper.
Yeah.
Not like freaked her out, but you know what I mean? It was just like not expected part of that curriculum. But I just had that scientific mind, and like you document, you know, like a lot of the engineering courses are like lab science and you're documenting as you go. But I did write that up. But you were saying I wrote up a grid workers, like kind of like what I consider a master's thesis. So I did intro classes with her, but then I also she does like private mentoring and grid work. So I was like, oh, what am I going to pick to do? So something that's close to my heart here in my river is the Blackstone River. And now I live close by it, but it runs from Worcester, Massachusetts, not Worcester, England, but we have all the same names of towns, right? It runs from Worcester, Massachusetts out to the bay by Providence, Rhode Island. And cleaning it up the community is great. You know, it has it was one of the biggest industrial corridors of the early textile mills and whatnot, and lots of dyes and lots of just all kinds of misuse, right? So, but yeah, you were saying that I did write up. So I took the things like through the sensory field, like the smell, you know, like the smell of toxic rivers. Like that was one of the sections or one of the chapters, was like transmuting through the smell, right? Mm-hmm. But you were talking when we did our prep work about the light. So I'm actually inner space where I'm sitting now is my healing center, or like light lab, sound lab, where I see clients and hang out. But I'm here on Lake Ripple. So there's a little slip of brook that runs behind my building, but it dumps out into Lake Ripple. And this is before I lived here, and before I think I had inner space, because I was at a different location. I was driving by, and I just like pulled over one morning, and anyway, it doesn't matter. I must have had inner space. I'm trying to remember, but I pulled over into the parking lot of the restaurant that's next to Lake Ripple, and get out of my car. And it's, you know, it's called Lake Ripple for a reason, but like the water and the light were doing this thing. And, you know, sort of like what you asked me before, it's like how do we download new data or new content or new information? Like we all do that, right? Probably a lot of people that are watching this, grid workers, light keepers, code keepers, especially. It's like when you're having one of those moments, like how does the information stream through? So I was looking at the water on the light on the water, and it was doing these things. And I was like, I could just, like, something's happening right there. And so like scientific me went over and like Googled it and whatever. And it was like, they talked about so it's H2O, right? So it's like the oxygen. And then if you drew it on a little thing, you know, it's like, it usually sits like that. And so the bonds, the chemical bonds, I'm like doing this backwards, and so these, like the lengths of the bonds get shorter and longer. Ooh. And I'll put I'm writing little notes. I'll put, if you want me to, I'll put a lot of links in on your Facebook wall, the John Todd thing. But the light codes, I looked it up, and it was like, oh, light affects water on a molecular level. It changes it kind of like, it does this, like, they have a graphic thing where it kind of shakes the two hydrogen molecules in relation to the central oxygen molecule, and like transforms it. And I just had one of those like eureka moments of like, oh, like light, you know, we know this because we're light, we work with water, we like work, we're doing grid work. It's like, for me, when I have one of those like scientific confirm this, like what I'm doing organically, it gets me really excited, because it's like bridge building between what we do. You know, I don't expect to convince the like staunch scientists, but the trail of breadcrumbs, like laying them or making bridges between spirit and science, has always been my soul calling.
Interesting. I wonder where that.
Not even necessarily to like, I realize now that it's not like beating my head up against the wall trying to convince scientists of the spirituality of things. It's in our spiritual, light worker community, people bandy about a lot of scientific terms. It's like more like decoding the science stuff for people that are using it, like you and I. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was
even like quantum, like people are like, oh, quantum, like to half the people actually know what that means. Like nobody gives you the decode manual to like know what that means. We just talk about like, oh, we're doing like quantum DNA light body activation, and it actually means something, and hearing the science part of it's fun too.
Do you want to, since you've like put a little a little trail there, do you want to like expand on that, on what it actually is? If you can
sure. I know I just set myself up for that, didn't I? On the spot. Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's just one of those, it's a really meaningful term, like quantum, and it's used so much. And so quanta, so in light mechanics, a quanta means like a discrete amount, like it's quantifiable, is the same, like the same root, a quanta. So it goes to, I guess we're talking more similar to the oxygen molecular science. It goes to like atomic, chemical, like how, so you have the nucleus and the protons and neutrons, and then you have electrons circling. So we're going to atomic science, if you will, right? And so like quantum physics really is the study of atoms and molecules and what they do. So you have the protons and the neutrons in the center in the nucleus, and then you have the electrons that move around, right? So the neutrons are neutral, protons are positive, and the electrons are the negative, and they move in orbitals. So this is how like we can go like right to the cosmic, into like the solar system too, because like the planets move. But if you just pictured oxygen has 8 electrons that circle it, and you could picture them, if you would, as like planets orbiting a sun around, right? And so how does one, and it gets more complicated than that because some of them are actually spiral 8 figure, like we can get into the whole thing of that, but how does an electron jump from one orbital path to the next? So a photon is the amount of energy that is delivered to this electron to leap it from one orbital ring to the next. So that's like quanta.
Interesting.
So quantum is like what accelerates one from one state of being to the next. That would be the short answer. So like quantum, it means like, but it has, and because of all the space between the orbital paths of the electrons, like anything that we think is solid matter is mostly space. Everything's mostly empty space. So there's a lot of like probability and like, oh, like I put my hand on my desk and most of the time it's solid, right? 99.999% of the time. But there's that one moment where the electrons in the molecules of the desk and the electrons in my hand are lined up such that I can put my hand through a wall, or I can walk through, It's a long explanation and off the cuff explanation. Was that what you're looking for?
That was awesome. Thank you.
But the quantum thing is like, that quantum light body activation, that's like ubiquitous in our field, right? It's like what's actually happening. It's like, it's all about the electrons and their spin rate and their where they're orbiting and like how they're moving. And like we light up the cells of our body through this like quantum activity of like exciting electrons.
Gotcha.
So it makes, when you get that, like when you called me to be on the show, I was like, yeah, I got a little, like my spin rates, my particles were
jumping up and down going, woo. Yeah. Now, you reminded me when you were speaking about the electrons moving around. So when I connected with water fairly recently, water gave me a symbol. I was actually at the spring where I was when we connected. And water gave me this symbol to use. I can't remember if I've spoken to you about this before or not. Oh, yeah. And when I use this symbol on my own body, I can feel everything kind of like, if the energy is a bit stuck, it just shifts it straight away. And I'm going to show you.
Was it this-ish? Oh, it's funny. I just drew this. It's not that. Is that what you showed me? Oh, okay. Ooh.
So it's very messy. So that
No,
is an
it's like an
octahedron.
octahedron. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's one in the center and there's 3 on either side, but
Ah.
they're all counter rotating. And it might even be like that, you know, that way through the page and back. I'm not sure, or if it's that way. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Well, it's all in one. It's like, it's
Mm.
this. So it's like, that's the thing, it's like, it's all about, you freeze frame it. I'm not saying your symbol, but like you freeze frame it for a second and they line up that way.
Yeah.
Right. But then really what they're doing is like,
Yeah.
this. And then you're like, oh, they can orbit this, they can just particles in general. I mean, not your symbol. That's so, can I say a few things about that's a cool symbol.
Yeah, please.
So that's water. I don't know if I've ever said this out loud to anyone before. I have this feeling that like, so I was 13 when Carl Sagan came out with that book, Contact. You remember that? Like Contact, like we all, right? And I remember as a 13-year-old reading that book and I was like, oh, they're looking the wrong way. Like this contact that we're looking for, like the alien life form, like it's like, they're not going to be they're not going to be humanoid beings. Like they should look vibrationally for other like star, the contact from. But fast forward to like nowish, I have this like theory that oxygen is really our source of life, right? And water is a big conveyor of that. But we're coded to this 8-body solar system. Like our sun has 8 planets orbiting around it. So my theory is like another sun, a distant sun that has 12 planets, or whatever, however many planetary bodies are around that sun is what the live beings that are in that solar system, that other star system, are coded for. And so it's like, we go to look for carbon-based, oxygen-based, breathing like human beings like we are. And that's not the intelligent life that is in these other star systems. They're just coded to be like, maybe it's around nitrogen or maybe they're like amoeba. It was just a whole different phase. I really took a little tangent there too, but that's what your symbol talked to me about is like, we are coded as oxygen-based beings who breathe in oxygen and live off that. So the 8 is like in the water. That's like our source of life. That's our life code.
Interesting.
But some other star, like if we're going to wax galactic too in any of your work? Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if we're talking, if we talk about like, oh, we want to speak with the Arcturians or this or that, it's like, to me, they never show up as corporal beings like we are. They're like light columns and they're light beings and they're all coded with different star system-ness.
Interesting. When Barbara Han Clow was interviewed with Regina Meredith, she described the Arcturians as outrageous geometry, were her words.
Yep.
Which just conjures up the most amazing image for me. So that's interesting as well, how we can perceive them in our own kind of way. I think that's amazing.
So I took us on a little tangent, but I'll bring you back to the spring where we made this connection, right? Where you showed me that, because you talked back to your symbol. So tell me about, if you don't mind, what's that? How does that speak to you?
It speaks to me, I'm not really sure. Like I'm intrigued as to why there are 7 circles, why there's like 3 on one side and 3 on the other and 1 centrally. I could imagine that with the concentric circles that's kind of creating geometry as well. It's when they're overlapping, they're creating, the Vesica Pisces. And that's probably as far as I've got. And just to acknowledge Suzanne Amara as well, this came through just before we did a water, I think it was just before we did a water cleanse activation together. And when I showed her the symbol, and I'd already got that they were moving, but she got that as well. Like I hadn't voiced that, but she voiced it. So there's something about that counter rotation and what that does to energy. And it's almost like Don Lynch in his work, I don't know if you're aware of him, he was one of my guests, and he talks about two counter-rotating circles. And I think, if I remember correctly, in the context of it, kind of my image that I get when I think of that is that it wobbles things, so that when something's stuck, it can then almost like a bubble, it can kind of like bubble out and be free. I've just noticed that there's subtitles coming up on the video, and I'm quite intrigued. It makes me want to do light language and just see what
the subtitle. What does that mean?
There's subtitles coming up on the live, which is interesting that they can do that. But part of me wants to do some light language and see see what the subtitles come up with. But anyway, I'm getting distracted.
Not to even put. You don't have to have like a meaning to like, the symbols come through. Maybe it's a cool time to talk about like light language and symbology, and because maybe a lot of people listening are, not dabbling or professional in that too. It's like light language bypasses, supersedes, eliminates the need for the mental constructs, like the human language or the human thoughts. But yet our humans here, the one performing them and interfacing with it. So like even that, there's a human me asking you that question, right? Maybe like, what does it mean to you? And it's like the transmission is vibrational for any light language, where it be out the mouth or the script or the actually seeing light particles on the water. And it's like, back to the first question you asked me of like, how did I start talking to water? It's like, all of it is like through your sensory field. So this wants to come out now too. So I did yoga. I did do yoga training. I was taking do you mind if I tell a little bit of story, Julie's story?
Please.
So when I was trying to finish I was finishing my engineering degree, I had a full-time job. I was commuting into Boston to try to finish up the classes that I blew off, and some more and I was doing a lot, and I was really stressed out. And a friend was like, you have to try yoga. So I didn't actually grow up in yoga.
Okay.
I used it as like a stress, like stress management thing. And I loved it. I just like loved it. The first class I took was in like, whatever, 1995. But I took it and I was just like into that space, felt very oneness-y to me. Then I got my certification, blah, blah, blah. What I was teaching yoga, I found the gentleman who ran the studio that I was teaching at had this class in Satnam Rasayan, and had his teacher come in from a ways. And she walked in the room and I was like, I wasn't planning to go to her workshop. I like turned around and followed her in the room. I was like, there's something here for me. So that methodology, whoever does the promo work for Reiki is really good, because the whole planet knows what Reiki is, right? Whoever is their PR person. But very few people have ever heard of Satnam Rasayan, so I don't really talk about it too much. It's like a branch of like yogic vibrational healing. But the thing of it is that has prepared me for talking to the water, talking to the stars, communicating with the Andaras, working with my clients, is so it's through the sensory field. Like all we can ever know is through the senses. So it's sensory field, as opposed to like, you're not sending energy or doing it or going into someone else's energy field and tinkering or doing anything. It's like you're in your space. And the yoga term, the Sanskrit term is shunya, which now in English we call 0 point. So you get into a state of, through your own sensory awareness field. So you're in meditation and you're feeling, sensing, hearing, smelling, like your whole sensory field. You feel the skin, your clothing texture on your skin. It's like a very relaxing form of meditation, but then it puts you into that sacred space where it's really the space of oneness, where all things are merged and as one. And when you're in that state, so instance, if I'm using it with like a one-on-one client, you just can, it's a vibrational resonance. You can feel like you just know where the blockage is, this and that. You just kind of in that merged state where you're not like separate and apart from someone, you're one. So that I've been training in that art form since the late 90s. And it kind of underlies everything that I do. Like, how do I, my clients will come in, it's like, whatever, in my thigh, like I had a car accident in like 20 years ago, but like that knot in my thigh, how did you know to go right there? I'm like, well, I've been doing this a while, but it's like that, knowing, like, or with the Andaras, when I started, I got my first Andara in October 2017, but it was like, I've gone so far and deep with them as a grid keeping tool and team member, that like the light language that they produce, like they spot off, but how do I, people ask me, like, how do you, the Andaras don't like come to life and like start talking to me human language, right? Like how any of this, it's all light language. So it's like, it's a vibrational transmission. So yeah, you started talking about the Lisa Brown. That was one of my, this is a good story. Like I had done a bunch of things, and your human self is like, what you should be doing and you should be doing. And one day I kind of blew everything off, and my daughter didn't have school maybe. And I was like, we make grids, crystal grids together. We had done a bunch of things. And I spent the day with my Andaras. This was maybe the first time I just like gifted myself that. And I had this like, oh, I should have been doing more. I wasn't doing too much. And was I doing anything? And then like, it's not a casual endeavor. If like Lisa Brown Facebook messaged me, and I was like, what? Like she invited me to come and do the crystalline grid keeper thing with her. And that was like the most humbling, amazing. And I was like, yes, please. Like, and then that was like my soul, like, okay, you were doing something, Julie, that day, you're not just like playing around with rocks and making things pretty, like, and it's also like the sharing of it. I think a lot of us do these things quietly in the comfort of our own neutral space. And it's like, takes a lot to like do something like what you do, have the show where you're on and you're like publicly, telling people what you do in the quiet times of your ceremonies, and, how you commune with the earth and how you like speak with the Andaras. And so it's, brave brothers and sisters like us that are like, oh, we'll actually talk about the wacky things that we do in our own spare time.
Do I have to?
So the Andaras are like, the light language for me is a lot more, like it's all the time, but it's like I do a lot of drawings of it. And I do and can, like light language comes through my mouth a lot too, but I find it more like private, like sort of, like it's so ceremonial. And so like, I'm not one to like make a video of like, like the language of it.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of toning and sound work.
That's how it started to come through with me, actually. I'd learned something called Anubis Reiki, which, similar to what you were saying, it's where you kind of, you and the client together go to the 0 point, to the with Anubis, you're going to that empty space, that void. That's the word I'm looking for, that void space.
Yeah, so that's what shunya means. It means void, nothing.
Yeah.
0 point. Yeah. Cool.
And the lady that taught me that encouraged us to use our voice in our sessions. So that's when I started using my voice, and light language had come through like one sentence before, but yeah, it's so interesting what can come through and what all this area is capable of producing. Like, you only need to listen to beatboxers and be like, how are you doing that? How does like the human form create those sounds? But when you start doing it yourself and doing your own tones and things come out that you didn't know that you could do, and overtoning and all that kind of stuff.
Have you connected with the Hathors?
Yes.
So that, like, when they sort of like came through and like, I don't want to say they installed, but we together like sort of installed this thing in my throat a bunch of years ago. And then I was like driving around in my car, and like that feeling of like, I didn't know a human throat could produce these sounds. And then after a bit of that, I found Tom Kenyon's work, and I was like, oh, okay. Do you know who that is? I'm sure.
I know his name. I don't think I've ever looked at his, it's come up before though. So,
but it's like that, it's like the amount. So for me, like it comes out as like more of like a toning, chanting, or there's some, occasionally. but it's cool, right? Like but it's like the sound codes. So we were talking about the photon thing, right?
Mhm.
Photons are the quantum particles of light. Phonons, they're not, phonons are the quantum particle of sound. So like you're affecting, I know I have a write-up to do about this because I need to share about the phonons found me like last year, but I had never heard, in all my dabbles of whatever, sound healing and physics, I'd never really heard that term before. But the phonons are, they're the same. They're the quantum particle that delivers sound. So there's a whole thing about the Andaras and toning with them, and how it works with crystalline structures and glass, and that like the activity of the liquid light that is Andaras, and toning with them does a whole other thing.
That's really interesting. And of course, things can be emitting a sound. Just because we can't hear it doesn't mean that it's not being emitted from something. And to me, light would hold a sound if our ears were tuned to pick it up, because it's a frequency band.
Right. And a lot of people right now are having that skill unlocked, to the ear, the hearing, a lot of the people, the ringing and the, it's like, oh, you're just being the clairaudient thing, or the clair of the ears is coming online massively for people. And then there's people like me that can hear everything and have been hearing everything their whole lives, and are like, I don't want to hear more than I already hear, but it's okay. It's like I have to remind myself to embrace it. It's like, it's okay to hear all the sensory inputs for people. Like some people are kinesthetic, and like just get it in their bodies, right? Some people have the sight and the hearing.
Do you see sound then as well?
Yeah, kind of. I feel like it's yeah, do you? Like yes-ish.
Yeah.
But I sense it. I'm more of like the sensory, like I can just feel it in my body, and I like know it. It just comes into my field. I hear a lot, and I do see things too, but I'm not like, there are people that are a lot more seers than I am, if that makes sense. I'm more of like a direct knower.
I just got an image flash up when you were saying that of me with my hands over somebody's body, because I often say my hands are my eyes. It's like my hands are going, deep into the body and kind of feeling the energy and feeling where it's flowing. But I just got a kind of image of my hands emitting, like, kind of, I got the dolphins coming through, almost like the ultrasonic things that the way of like scanning. And that could be happening, but I'm just not aware of it, that there's like a pulsing, and then you're kind of like reading the pulsing and where it goes in and where it comes back.
Yeah, and my higher self just totally laughed at me after I just said I'm not a seer, because I totally am. But I would say to my clients after, you close your eyes and we all get that, like, it's like a kaleidoscope, right? Or like a geometry. I see in geometries. And so yes, can I see sound? Yes, but I don't. But I would often say to people, I'm like, I wish I had an app, or like I knew Illustrator enough that I could like this, show you this lava lamp kaleidoscope thing that's going on when I'm working with your energy field. Like if you could see what I see. But I love that. Go back to that, the sonar. It's like, yeah, it's like your scanning tools, right? Or like on Star Trek, they have the tools that like just scan the field, right? It's like the hands-on healer has her or his hands.
And the feeling of like hearing the energy of the body, not just feeling it, but actually hearing it. Because as you know, when you do sound near a body, so if you're doing the tuning forks, or I've got chimes that I use, and as you come into the energy field where it's a bit stuffed, where it's not flowing so well, it will stop reverberating. The reverb will stop. And I thought there was something wrong with my chimes when that first happened, because I'd bang it and it'd be like blink, like, and I'd be, what's going on? And then lift it up to listen, and as soon as I lifted it off the physical body, it would start reverberating, and I'd be like, that's interesting. You put it back down, it goes quiet again. You lift it up, and it, you know, you hear the reverb again. And then I'd kind of like do my magic on the body and ding it a few more times. And then it's like if that's the blockage, this is how I used to describe it. The sound waves are just pummeling that until it like gives way.
Oh my God, it's so fun to talk to you about this. I had visioned when I did have a yoga studio for a long time, but then my 2012 like shift was to stop doing that and stop doing yoga and to do this kind of work with people. So, but I could see, you know, I was doing a lot with the chakras, but I kept wanting chakra chimes. And I finally found this. I have this like giant thing. I can run and go get it if you want, but it has the 8 octaves. You know, it's like a musical scale, but I use it to relax the person on at the beginning of sessions, but I use it as a scanning tool. And, you know, I just go up the scale and like there's atonal frequencies somewhere along the way. And so it kind of guided me when I was like newer at this. It would like guide me of like which part of their field to work on. But like exactly what you're talking about, like there's like a discordance in the certain section of the field. And yeah, it's like a blob or like a thing that you encounter that it's like, oh, that's the, yeah.
And there was some sound healer that was interviewed again by Regina Meredith, and she was saying it's like the rings of a tree. So the further out in the energy field, the earlier in the life that it was, and that you could almost measure. So the more recent stuff is more close to the body, and the, you know, further out, the younger the person would be.
That's amazing. Like we could talk for hours, Denise. This is so fun. But that in the field, but I was really resonated with what you were talking about is like, then you do the energy aligning with your friend, your client, and then you reuse the sound tools. And it's like, oh, it's clear now, right? It's like flow. It's all about resistances in the field of flow and like eliminating those.
Yeah.
Or shifting them, you know.
Yeah.
Dissolving them is a better thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, one thing that we said at the beginning before we came on that you might share about was the beehive site. Do you want to share that, or do you feel that that's?
Yeah, sure. No, it's kind of a cool because it relates definitely to sound. You're talking about in my grid work training. One of the classes that I took, we were supposed to pick a site to work with. And then there was a group of us in this class, and a bunch of us we're gonna like see how across the globe we could link sites and work with sites. So in my early grid worker mind, I was like, oh, it didn't occur to me that there was a lot of sites here in New England. You think of like, you know, Glastonbury, you think of like Stonehenge, you think like you've got them all over there in England, right? And like, or you got to go to Egypt, or you got to go wherever. And so I just started doing a little bit of research, and I was like, oh, there's one like 2 miles from there's this astronomical stone site that's a couple miles from my house, and it unlocked this whole like realm of knowing about the stonework that's here in North America. And not that I hadn't heard of like other places, I just didn't know I had one like literally almost in my backyard. But so there's one of the most well-preserved and largest stone structures here in New England is a couple miles, like a mile from where my kids go to school. And it's a corbelled construction. They basically mean they don't use mortar with the stones. So it's shaped, they call them beehive chambers because they're shaped like the big domes. And if anyone had watched one of the later Star Wars movies, you know, where Luke goes, like, so he goes to Skellig Michael. I mean, they film it there, but he's on that, you know, when he goes into his thing. So I started doing a whole bunch of research about them, and like the big still lingering question is like, who built them and why and what are they for? But for me, I had more of like a awakening with it. It was like, well, not that we don't care about who did. We might never know that. Like that remains a mystery of like, what can we use them for now? Like, what are they about now? So this local one of mine is a beehive chamber that is a chamber and then has a 14-foot like tunnel or like a neck to it. So it's said, and there have been a lot of people, astronomers, archaeologists, people that care about stone work that have done tons of research on this that paved the way for me. But so I went and like found all the books and bought all the books and read all the books and looked online and went to the library and like figured out. So they had done a lot of research with it. There's an organization called NERA, and I should know what it says, Northeast Regional Archaeoastronomy, something I should know off the top of my tongue, but like that. But basically it's aligned to the summer solstice sunset. So they think this could have been like kind of like an early telescope, if you will. Like if you sit in the center of the chamber, it darkens your field, and there's like a little eye window that you look through. So there are also stone cairns on the hill that's a few miles away that the chamber looks towards. And so there are a ton of set alignment stones. There's one for the sun that sets on the summer solstice, but there's also a chunk that it's a Pleiades set too. So this started this whole like it's not when the Pleiades set in the summer because they're not visible then. So like the heliacal rising and setting of stars and like the seafaring villages or beings that would live in the Mediterranean, like who cares about the Pleiades and when they rise and set, and why would there be alignment stones here that are set to that? Like who's that important for? So some Mediterranean cultures would use do we know what heliacal, should I explain what that is? The setting and the rising. So basically like the sun moves across the sky, right? And sometimes it's near other stars. And when the sun's near a star, we don't see it because it's out during the day, right? So we want to see stars we can only see the stars at nighttime. So the sun, when the sun and the star are really near each other, it's like the star goes invisible, right? So when the last time you see it at night is the setting of it before it goes into its like conjunction time with the sun. So this chamber is set to that, and there's a lot to talk about it, but I was doing tons of research and I was trying to not even figure out who built it, but just like learn more about it. And this Irish monk, so one of the theories is that the Irish Chaldee monks came across the Atlantic in way before Columbus, like back in the day, in the early AD, like 300, 600, 700, and maybe shared with the Native Americans who were here then, the construction, so I was exploring that and reading about that a little bit, and like, why would the shamans or the people that were here build, if you're a nomadic, not even agricultural based person, like how are you going to spend that much time building these stone chambers? It's like these are the mystery parts of it, but like, or what would that have to do with it? So I was researching about Saint Brendan the Navigator, is this like Irish monk, and he has these very fantastical tales about his voyage, that he got the call from God and was like, you got to build sort of like Noah's Ark-ish. You got to build a ship, and you got to take monks, and you got to go find the promised land or the new land. And he did that, supposedly built a ship, and he has his journey is like a classic Irish folk tale, or like a parable or missive that people read about. And it talks about his journey across the ocean and how you'd see these giant pillars, crystals coming up out of the ocean. And he like stopped on the back of this island, and they got out to like cook. All the monks got out to cook, and it turned out it was the back of a whale. And so he had this whole, like, there's like a whale tale that happened on like the Easter Sunday. And he talked about this like island of sheep, and like, now people are saying like, oh, maybe he came across, maybe it's Iceland, maybe it's the Faroe Islands, maybe it's Azores, maybe those are icebergs, and he just didn't know because they hadn't been out. But I was meditating with, communing with this whole thing, and I read this little snippet of something that I researched that said those beehive chambers were built so that like 10 monks could stand in them, 10 to 12 men. Like that's about the diameter of it. And they just had this like super strong merge image / like I was back there with them, of the Irish monks standing shoulder to shoulder in a circle inside this hut and doing toning, as in Gregorian chanting. And I was like, oh, they didn't build them for any, like they built them to tone in. And it was just one of those like ping, ping, ping moments. So I had also found a friend here who it turns out her sister used to own the house that was like on top of this beehive chamber that's here in our neighbor area. And she had been in it a bunch and she was like really curious about it. And so we were like, she's also like kind of like one of us, you know, she grid works and does things. And we were like, let's go in and tone. I actually had, it's sort of like a star message too, that there's a beehive cluster in the crab constellation that I'll talk about it some other time. But that was like there was a certain date. It was like July 27th of, I think it was 2019. It was like, you need to go in the chamber and reactivate it. You need to do it with sound code. And I was like, okay. But it's like pretty, I'm not like a cave girl. I'm not like a go into the bowels of the earth kind of like spider loving girl. So I brought my friend Genevieve along because she's like, oh, I've been in it lots of times. It's brave. So we went in and we started toning, and like the light language toning, like, and the chamber toned back. And it was like, we just heard this like, and we were both like, I've never ran so fast. We were like screaming like little, like, ching! Out into the daylight. And we were both like, we just looked at each other like, did that just happen? Did that really just happen? You know, ostensibly it was like a frog that was in there, but like neither one of us really think it was a frog. It was like the chamber reawakening.
Wow.
That was
I'm so goosey listening to this. Like I've got goose pimples all over. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I haven't been back in to do it since, honestly, because it has a lot of standing water. Maybe I'll go back. You know, I'm like, I go to it a lot, but I don't like go in and chant. But it has a little notch at the top of it too, that like sound gets out. So
interesting. And so many things in South Africa as well seem to be, you know, if you look at the work of, oh, I'm not going to remember his name. No, it's not going to come. I nearly did. He talks about there are millions of these like circular structures that they're finding all over South Africa. And to him, it's to do with sound. And that just rings so true with me. And they find these like big stones that are almost kind of like chicken drumstick shaped, like they're narrow and then kind of bulbous. And they are linked to this.
Is he the one that strikes the stones?
I think that's someone different. Okay. I think I've seen a video of someone striking those stones. He has done. I've seen him do that.
They're all around there. So it's this whole thing. So for me, it like sparked this whole, it's been many, many years journey of like discovering them and like going to visit them and reading about, you know, connecting with them, because there's hundreds around here in New England and nobody quite knows what they're here for. You know, there's like what they're here for, why they're here. But it's like, then one of my friends, a different friend, I brought her to visit this beehive chamber. And she said like the most magical sentence to me that maybe anyone's ever said. She's like, Jewel, what if you built it? Like, what if future you built it for you now? Like maybe you built this for yourself to use now. And I was like, right? Like maybe these sites have been built. Maybe they weren't used back then for what we think they were. Maybe they're here for us to do this stuff in now. Past me, future me, put that thing and put me here.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, when you were talking about it, I wondered, you know, were you one of those monks that was in there shoulder to shoulder?
I don't know. I think I'm living a better life now than I would have been back in that life. Like they were kind of austere. Is that the right word? But maybe, but like they're here now for our you know, a sound chamber, you know, then I'm sure you've played with this too. Anyone that's a sound healer would go to like those places in Egypt that they found in the Egyptian tombs, like the sound chambers where people would go in and like that's like the wave. It's the wave of our past and it's the wave of our future. And it's the wave of our now, right? Because I do a lot of different work with people, but I've like moved more and more into like sound and like, not just with my voice, but with tuned instruments and whatnot. Because it's like, it really does recode the whole field in a way that nothing else I've encountered does.
And presumably was linked to the original gridding too. I can't imagine that it wouldn't have been linked to it.
Right.
It feels like it has to be one of the crucial components of, because that's what I feel we're doing now. We're creating the foundations, the framework for New Earth with sound.
Mm-hmm.
And crystals as well. Like I can't really, and light, like sound, crystals and light, just,
Right. That's when I found that phonon thing, and I was like, oh, that's the link. Like, how do you get those three together? Right. It's like working with the crystals. We know how they work with light and photons, right, and codes, and but like they do work with sound too. I'll send it your way when I manage to get it out of here and onto like here.
And presumably emit sound too, again,
right?
that we can't actually hear.
Play with that, friend. Thank you for that little not little, big. I feel like we should play some things. We both brought instruments, and I've never hung out with anyone else who I've been playing with crystal pyramids for years now. But then when we were doing a little, Denise pulled hers out a moment ago. And I was like, wait, you have a crystal pyramid too? Like little sound geeks that we are. You want me to ring it for you? You have yours too? Did you say you got yours? Have you been playing with it for?
Oh, I just love it.
And have you noticed this about, do you mind if I say a few? Because you just got yours, you said a week ago or so, right? You notice that there's a different pitch.
Yes. How does it do that? Even if you hit the same spot, it's different. And I hear like three tones. One's kind of like almost constant. It's got a constant rhythm. And then there's like overtones with it.
And then there's like a wah-wah pedal setting too.
Yeah.
Like a guitar. It's like it wah-wahs. Yeah.
It's Michael Tellinger. Michael Tellinger is the guy that I was trying to think of. If you don't know about his work, check him out. It's really interesting.
Okay.
Really interesting.
Should we go out with a cloud of sound?
Yes. We'll probably have to do it separately just because of Zoom's limitations. Right. But
this has been so delightful. I feel like I want to talk to you all day.
I know. We'll have to do this again soon. It just makes me so happy.
They're the best. I love them. So I'm gonna guess. So I have a 15-inch and an 8-inch. Is that a 22 or 20?
I'm not sure.
Because the larger they are, the deeper the sound is. The smaller they are, they're like high pitched. But that one's like that one.
I would say it's 22. I'm just trying to picture a 30.
That was mine.
No, I don't think it's quite that big. I reckon it's like maybe 15.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Haven't measured it.
I know once you get one, you just want to get, I want to get one of all sizes, but they're significant investment of
I
dollars.
got crystal tuning forks as well, or one that's set on A, and I'm being guided that I'm to get a G as well. So it doesn't make much sound, but you know, you put it on the body and the reverberation is incredible. I was singing into this the other day. No, it was fun. Oh my!
Is that a hand bowl? A crystal hand bowl? Like a, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah. It's quite light. I don't think Zoom picks that up so well.
No, I can hear. We can hear it. I can hear it.
But it's so beautiful.
So I feel like we're comparing toys. So I bought this. This was my gift to myself a little bit ago. Or not gift to myself, inner space. They're all like, we're so smart because these are like for me, like it's a tax deduction. it's a work tool. But this is a Zen VibraPoint. So this year I've heard a lot. I work a lot with the metallic light rays, and I have for years. But this year I was like, game on the metals is like metallics. And then a friend of mine told me that it's the year of the metal ox in Chinese astrology too. But this one is it's a Zen VibraPoint, so it's made for putting on. It's a sound healing instrument, you know, for acupressure points. And I do a lot with the marmas. Do you know Ayurveda that much? It's Ayurveda is like the sister science to yoga. It's like the science of life. But the marma points are locations on the body where they're like control valves, if you will, for the prana, the nadis, energy to flow. So this is designed to be like either for acupressure or marma pressure. And it does have one of the roundy rounds like yours does, but it doesn't pick up that well. Just that you put it down, like you put it on a pressure point and it like melts the whole the whole scene.
Wow. I want to come around to your house.
Yeah, come and play.
With all my toys. Oh, right? I just felt really dizzy then when I put my head down and put it up. I'm kind of going like this now. Oof. This has been amazing.
Agreed. Super fun. Thank you so much for inviting me on your love fest.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. My head's still
time. Yeah, right.
I'm
it's
still
around
spinning. Okay, so I will just invite us back to our hearts so that we all leave in our heart space and go on our merry way with our awareness in our hearts. And let's just beam out a whole lot of love again. And even if you're watching this on a different day on the replay, all good. It's Earth Day every day. Thank you, lovely. This really has been incredible. And thank you, everybody who's been watching as well. Either live with us or in the time traveler now, in the future now, or on YouTube. So thank you, everyone. This has just been absolutely lovely. I will stop the live stream. See you soon, everybody.